Tim. Welcome to What You Want, and thanks for logging on. Well, I hope you all had a lovely weekend. Josh Thanos is back with us from a weekender in Key West with his wife. How was it, Josh?
Nice and hot.
Yeah, it's Florida in March. It can't really get much better. So I'm sorry to bring you back.
No, it was very enjoyable.
Yeah. Well, and from the other side of the world, Frigid Basel is over, and we're back to our regularly scheduled programming. I want to give you guys a shout out because I owe it all to you, but we are about to cross over the threshold of 10 million views since I started this channel by taping my camera phone to a chair and talking about a watch on a wrist pad.
Wow.
For a keyboard. So thank you so much for taking me from there to here. And guys, we should pass the threshold sometime tomorrow. I want to thank you all. You made it possible. Here's to 10 million more. Now, I'm in a great mood today because Philippe Gilbert won the Tour of Flanders, which means nothing to anyone around here at the office.
Who and what?
Exactly. I can get over the fact that my Yankees lost on opening day because some guy who's a Walloon in Flemish Belgium won a 160-mile bike race. So I'm really thrilled.
Yeah,
well,
great.
As I'm riding that high, let's come back down. The FH statistics for February are in, Josh, and we saw a 10.4% reduction in sales value compared to last February. Have we come back to earth from the December and January high?
It seems like it. Well, I know that for us specifically and a lot around the in the industry, February tended to be a good month, but obviously like there's lagging indicators and whatnot. So, I mean, listen, whenever there's a high, there's always going to be a low associated with it. I think, this year's still going to be decent.
Yeah.
It's going to be better than the last 2 years. It seems like. Only time will tell. And, the economy is at least the U.S. economy is definitely going to be a factor, and it seems like right now we're doing okay. But, I guess we'll see.
And like Josh says, the U.S. economy is kind of good. I would say globally maybe buyers are in a holding pattern. There's a lot of uncertainty. But I also think it's important to remember that it's good not to get too caught up in any single datum.
Yeah.
Like 2 points is a trend. One could be an anomaly. And this month, we saw a complete reversal of last month. We saw in January that the U.S. saw 5% sales growth. And now here come the February statistics, and we're seeing negative 26. I think
These are retail numbers, of course.
Yeah, these are all new watch sales coming from Switzerland. I think that's just maybe people reacting to uncertainty in the U.S. politically, kind of seeing a new administration, don't know which direction the economy is going to go.
Right.
A lot of people are also kind of in a refractory period after holiday spending.
Yeah, definitely. And that's usually what we see in February.
Yeah.
So again, like for us specifically, we saw some record numbers for February. Again, things are changing for us personally, but I mean, I know other dealers who are doing fine in February, but we're waiting for that retractor exactly. Like people relaxing a little bit.
And like Josh says, things have been good on the pre-owned side. We're talking strictly of the FH statistics. The FH
Exports.
is the Association of the Swiss Watchmakers, and it gives us statistics in terms of volume and value each month. Right. Now, these came out on March 27th. I'm sorry I didn't get them to you in time, guys, but the summary is that steel, which had been neutral in January, got hammered 6.1%. Precious metals are still being routed in the market, negative 16.6%. The U.S. market, which was robust in January, got hammered in February. Hong Kong and the USA were the hardest hit. Mainland China and the UK were the bright spots.
Right, and which is mainland China was a big deal for the last 2 years because of President Xi. That it was the cracking down on the
gifting.
Exactly. So
basically
corruption. That's what I'm looking for. So cracking down the corruption, it put a stop, a dead halt to a lot of the imports for Swiss watches, and that was a big deal for a lot. I mean, that was a pipeline for a lot of the watches in the United States. I mean, I know I have customers in China, and we're able to sell to them for a while, and now things are starting to pick up a little bit, so it's good.
Yeah, there are things that transcend periodic laws. Like there are gifting cultural norms in China that for a period could be reined in, but overall, having been hauled back from the extremes of enforcement to something maybe of a new normal between what they were prior to the laws and what they were immediately after the laws, there's a middle ground where sales have stabilized and even bounced back a bit in the mainland.
Yeah.
And we're seeing a lot of reductions in Hong Kong, which still remains politically and economically distinct from the mainland.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And there's actually a great deal of high-value inventory there, which is exciting to me, because I'd love to go there and pick up cheap tourbillon with like cloisonné enamel dials, but that remains a market in a bit of a commercial route. The runaway loss leaders, and this was interesting for me, in the Swiss production for February, were not the watches we conventionally consider the subject matter for this show. They were actually watches priced principally below 200 Swiss francs.
Right.
This was the greatest area of retrenchment in sales. So it's important to note that we're talking about watches here that are swatch watches, that are quartz watches, that are in a lot of ways vulnerable to fight back from smart watches.
Right, and I think that's what we're seeing. Like people have been asking for years, ever since the iWatch came out, or the Apple Watch, and even some of the prior pieces.
Yeah,
like
Galaxy
is that
Gear, stuff like that.
Right, is that going to affect? That's definitely going to affect the Swiss watches, and it really wasn't apples to apples, right? It wasn't 1-to-1. So now what we're seeing is exactly that. So the watches that would be competing in that price range, $200 to $500 or so, those are the ones taking the hit, and as they should be.
And like Josh says, with no pun intended, this is apples to apples. The $200 Swiss watch versus roughly the $300 to $600 US Apple Watch. We are seeing reduction in those cheaper watches, but those really aren't the luxury products we normally consider.
No.
It's just worth mentioning that true luxury watches, those priced over 3,000 Swiss francs, were down 11.9%. The loss leaders, down 21.6%, were those cheaper watches, typically quartz-powered, plastic-cased, and machine-assembled.
Well, even the Swatch, I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but the Swatch store locally here near me shut down.
Yeah. So there is belt tightening at Swatch USA too, and this is something you're going to see globally through just about all branches of Swiss watchmakers, with at the moment, the exception being mainland China. And I'm wondering if some of the sales in the UK aren't a little bit of a holdover, sales that would have been made prior to or during the Brexit period, when people maybe felt too much uncertainty to spend. We're just seeing holdover sales rather than a real change.
It's very possible. Yeah, in the end, sales are sales. So whether they come now or later or before, they're going to be made. So you can look at them however you like.
Yeah. Do you book them to 2016 or 2017?
Yeah, I say when the money's in.
Exactly. when the wire lands, as we like to say.
When the moolah's in the cooler, as Brian Gopher likes to say.
Okay, so now here's a question that's coming through. This is from Bob B., who actually emailed me direct, and he asked, I'm curious what your thoughts are on the Panerai PAM 562 Luminor base. This is a titanium watch with an 8-day in-house movement. Came out in 2014. What do you think of this watch?
I'm a sucker for a manual line Panerai. This one essentially pays homage to a watch of mine that I own that hopefully will be on my wrist pretty soon. It's sitting back down there is a PAM 002. So just a regular it's a two-hand base.
Yeah, it's what's generally called the base by Panerai guys.
Base luminar. So it's just hour and minute, and 8-day movement, titanium case, which is really nice because a lot of people are going to be the weight of the pin around the wrist. Tends to be a little bit too much. It's a 42 millimeter also, which scales it back, which I've been really into 42 millimeter Panerais lately. I've been thinking a lot about them. So I'd say across the board, it's a great entry into the Panerai world, especially if you don't have larger watches. If you wear, say, like Rolex Submariners, or even like a Sea Dweller, like what I have here. I don't know if we can.
You're wearing the 40?
I'm working the 4000 here, the 40 millimeter Sea Dweller, which now seems to be on the rise in regards to value retention.
Yeah, that's number one with a bullet on my list of Rolex has made in the last 10 years that are going to be collectibles.
Yeah, and we talked about it before, and a lot of people have been. I've been contacted by a lot of my collectors looking for this watch now, and I think that. So I digress. So the 42 millimeter case is a great bridge into Panerai because the 44 millimeter is going to be the traditional piece, which tends to be a little bit large, but once you get used to it, it's okay.
And I'll mention that this watch is also attractive to the guy who maybe isn't totally into the Panerai image, in that it features a brushed titanium finish, and the brushed finish is going to be a lot more muted than the polished steel. When you get big, and even a 42 is big, Panerai watches are big. There is no such thing as a small Panerai, not yet.
No. The Douai, I guess, but we don't call those Panerais.
It's a thin, exactly.
Yeah.
The Douai, a Panerai in name only. So I would say this is a great watch. Now, Bob also asked about the caliber. Caliber 5000 actually came out a year before the 562. It's an 8-day manual wind movement. It operates at 3 hertz, so 21,600, and it's got 2 mainspring barrels. There are only 2 reservations I have about it. One is that it's not particularly a It's not a watch that's putting up any pretense of being a chronometer. With 2 mainspring barrels, no way of independently reading the seconds, frankly, a very long power reserve to pull out of just 2 mainspring barrels. I think really you generally see 3 with this many days of power reserve. There might be a large variance in torque output between the beginning and the end of the power reserve, but again, without a seconds hand, that's not really a concern. And then the other thing for me is just when you've got an 8-day power reserve and no visual means of tracking how much of that's left, you got to really remember which day you wound it.
Right, and that's one thing. So I have 2 manual wind Panerais, and they're both like essentially 3-day movements, right?
Yeah.
So I know like every 2.5 days, give it a wind. 8-day movement without a power reserve, even on the back, the case back, like that, it would be perfect, like a 422, right? That has the it's that one's I think a 4-day or 5-day or whatever movement, and it has a power reserve on the back, which is perfect. And so if they released the same model with a power reserve, which I know Panerai has done, where they kept the name but added certain things, so like a power reserve or change the AM/PM indicator, they could keep it that way and improve the watch, in my opinion.
Yeah, I know. Like Josh says, the 422 and the 423 with case back and dial side power reserves. A lot of people say that if you got a power reserve on the dial, it kind of ruins the Panerai essence. I'll buy that. I do
PAM
think
90 though. I mean, PAM 27, like that's a tradition.
There are some that just will say. Very few iconic dial-side Panerai power reserves have come out. Those aside, it's great to just have a simple dial. And if you're going to have just one Panerai, lighter, subdued in appearance, fantastic in-house movement, it's great if you're going to wear it just once a week, because if you're that guy who's got a rotation and you put this movement in your collection, then you just have to wind it that one day a week when you wear it. If you're not a hardcore Paneristi,
makes sense.
and it's part of a rotation of watches, you're a collector of many brands, then all of a sudden the 8-day thing makes sense without a power reserve scale. And it's got a nice looking case back, and I think we should also mention it's not part of the decontented class of Panerai that came out about a year ago.
Yeah, the 630, 630, 632, 634. It's a full-on Panerai. You can take the watch in the water.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that's one thing I feel like if you can't take the watch in the water, you can't call it a Panerai.
Or even if there are things that just don't fit. Like, for instance, the 630, 632, and 634, those were the watches that came out with basically unfinished ETA calibers in them. Instead of the screws and bars, which, for instance, the 562 uses, or the quick-release lug system that some of the more upscale models use, there was that whole class of spring bar and pin-perforated lug Panerai that came out to be able to deliver the watch at a price point. They also had snapbacks, so despite having solid casebacks, they were 100-meter water resistant rather than 300.
Right.
The 562 is not part of that cost-cutting class, so it gets our blessing and our sign-off as long as you're okay with not having a reserve to marsh gauge.
Do we know what the retail is? I can't remember off the top of my head.
I can't off the top of my head. That's the one thing I never pay attention to. I'm not good at tracking retail of these things.
I should remember that one, but I think it's pretty affordable as a retail. At retail, and obviously pre-owned, you're going to be able to get it at a better price.
Yeah, and the fact that it's been out for like 3 model years now means that you have your choice of buying it new or buying it pre-owned.
Sure, yeah, we've had it plenty of times. It's a great watch.
And, it's also important to remember that if you're going to go with just one, get the essential one. It's like most people who buy just one Rolex, they're not going to be like, well, I want to get the Milgauss Z Blue. They want to get the one that is that platonic form of Rolex or Panerai, and this is that.
Something that looks like this.
So now another question. This is from Kyle S., who emailed me and asked, Tim, could you please explain the relationship between Tudor and Breitling that was announced at Basel? Kyle, basically it's movement sharing to this point. Tudor is giving something to Breitling. Breitling is giving something to Tudor. For Tudor's part, the deal involves receiving Breitling's B01 caliber, doing business as the Tudor MT5813. Now, it's the B01 up to a point, so it's still got the column wheel and the vertical clutch, smooth engagement, no hazard in running it full time, no jump when you start the chronograph hand, always resets. Those are the virtues of a column wheel and a vertical clutch. But there is a little bit of a change with respect to the Tudor version of this, which is built by Breitling for Tudor. Tudor doesn't build it in any sense other than casing it. So they use a Tudor regulator, so a free-sprung balance and a free-sprung index, and they also use Tudor's silicon hairspring. That is not a technology that Breitling has. It was originally developed by a consortium of Swatch Group, Patek Philippe, and Rolex, and Tudor, being the sister brand of Rolex, is going to use that technology in the MT5813. Now, here's the thing. It is COSC certified. It does have all of the virtues of the BO1, the hacking, the quick set, the refinements we discussed earlier, but in order to help Tudor reach its price point, to have a sophisticated, non-ETA, non-modular chronograph in the Tudor Black Bay chronograph, they had to go outside their family. They couldn't put the Daytona caliber 4130 in here and hit their price. To sell it at almost $5,000 on the nose, they needed economies of scale, which meant they needed someone who's already making a movement. And in Breitling, they found a willing dance partner. Now, Josh, you know Breitling's been beleaguered. They're allegedly for sale.
Yeah,
I mean, talk
but
about
they have been for like 5 years or so.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of broken in the last couple of months that Breitling might be for sale. The Snyder family, which is held since 1978, might be looking to make a move.
Right.
With Breitling, okay, Breitling is getting a Tudor movement, but unlike Tudor, they're not doing anything to its architecture.
Right, they're just slapping it in their watch, and well, they upgraded a watch that looks exactly the same.
Yes.
The only difference is the movement, which is now a Tudor Pelagos movement.
And here's the funny thing. Tudor is not mentioning Breitling on their website. They're not saying that this is a Breitling movement that
Smart
we
play.
modify. They're saying this is the manufacturer 5813.
Yeah.
And that's Tudor's line. Now, Breitling on their website, they are launching this movement, which is the Tudor MT 5612 from the Pelagos, as the Breitling caliber B20, which in the age-old watchmaking art of own rotor construction has been relabeled a Breitling movement. But they do mention Tudor on their website copy for the Super Ocean Heritage 2. And here's the thing, that's their best-selling modern model line.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the franchise player.
Yeah, and it didn't make much sense. I saw when this was released, I was actually up in Philadelphia, and we saw this, and it just like, oh, hey, we released a brand new watch that's exactly the same as the old watch, and it just has a movement that we didn't make, so here you go.
Yeah, I almost feel like for Breitling, I don't see the value here. I see the value in selling movements to Rolex Tudor. That makes sense. But I feel like in order to set the Super Ocean Heritage apart, this is still a price point sensitive brand and a price point sensitive model line, and I don't think they could have gone wrong with just sticking with the ETA movements.
Yeah. Well, if they wanted to upgrade this watch, they call it a Heritage 2, right? And besides the movement, am I missing anything? Is it literally the same watch, right?
They changed the lugs a little bit. They went to
Great.
a ceramic bezel and they went to broadsword hands.
Okay, so ceramic bezel's always an upgrade. And that's good. But I mean, there's things that they could have done to enhance the watch that I feel like they didn't. Slapping a number 2 on it because the number 1 sold so well.
And because a sequel is the Breitling thing to do, Super Ocean 2.
Sequels
Super
are always
Ocean
great
Heritage
too, by the way, right?
Emergency 2.
So, right, Emergency 2, 90 millimeter watch on your wrist. So, I mean, I don't know. It all seems very Breitling, I guess. Which, again, without being pretentious, Breitling makes cool watches. I own a Breitling. I encourage people to purchase Breitling. Just be careful when you do. Don't think you're buying something that's going to go up in value, or if you buy it at a retail level, or something that's going to be high horology. It's a nice watch. It's hardy watch. You can beat the hell out of them because a lot of times they are just base ETA model movements, and they're well made and they're handsome to some degree depending on what you like. For example, I personally like the Transoceans. Don't sell very well, so it's a great value play. When you go secondary market, you can get these things at great discounts because they don't sell so well, but they're great watches like the 1461 Moonface, things like that. It's
value for money.
Value for money, which is what I'm all about. And they are cool looking watches. They have a name. If you're looking for a watch that people can recognize, if you say it, everyone knows. So people know Breitling when they hear it. Rolex, Breitling, Cartier. A lot of times is what like the layman people.
I would throw Omega in there sometimes.
Okay, Omega too sometimes, but honestly, I wear my Omega a lot of times, and I say, they go, oh, is that an Omega? I think I saw, James Bond. I'm like, oh yeah, it's a watch. But Breitling tends to be a very popular brand. So
now, if I could just interject, I'd say in 2015 there were 3 mainstream brands in a tailspin, image-wise: Panerai, Hublot, and Breitling.
Yep.
And of those 3, Breitling is the one that is still not emerged from its tailspin. I know Breitling Aviation, pun accepted. The rest of that is all true.
Yeah.
Breitling is a company that has been reeling for a couple of years with watches that are frankly too big. There are too many models. The new models are indistinct from the old models. There's too much production out there for what the market can accommodate.
Right.
And I don't think going up market, even if it does mean there's a better movement in the watch is the right direction. The Super Ocean Heritage sells on value and image and nothing more.
Well, you want to stay in your lane, you wouldn't, if you're making Breitling watches, throwing in a Patek level finished movement in there's never going to do well for you. You're just going to cost you a lot of money. It's going to be a watch that's going to be reselling for nothing, and those are watches that you're going to find on the gray market left and right. I will tell you this. Out of everything that Breitling makes, I like their quartz pieces.
Okay.
I like the B50. I like the B55 a lot. Obviously, I have an aerospace. The emergencies are cool too. So, out of all their models, I tend to say, and you know what? Now I'm thinking about it, I tend to hold some like decent value.
Yeah.
You know, those are the watches because their price points are right a lot of times, and they're cool watches and they're very wearable for the most part, except for the emergency 2.
Yeah.
So
that one, you laugh at it until it saves your life. And if you're an offshore sailor, a wilderness hiker, or you are an aviation enthusiast or professional, there is that 1 in a million chance, and that's when you stop laughing.
Or if you're just a humongous human being.
True.
Just a large gentleman, be like 7 feet tall, so like a Shaq type character.
You get stuck in your house.
Absolutely. Well, that too, but you can wear the watch. You can pull it off from a fashion standpoint. But if you're, listen, if you need the watch to save your life, fantastic watch, please buy it. But I'd say most people who are purchasing this watch aren't using it to save their life.
Yeah, so in other words, it's sort of an unequal partnership. And to answer everyone's question, I don't see this as a precursor to a Breitling sale to Tudor. Right now, Tudor is getting everything it needs from Breitling, a movement made en masse with economies of scale that gives it some prestige and capability and a high feature content level without having to buy Breitling and all of its baggage. It's like South Korea really, I hear a lot of Americans say, well, maybe someday the North Korean regime will fall and the Koreas will be reunited. In South Korea, that's like a reverse tumor extraction. Like they don't want to merge with the North with the environmental and political and landmine issues. And it's just at the point right now where I don't see Rolex wanting to absorb Breitling and all of its problems if it already has access to the movements.
I gotta ask, did you come up with that on the spot? Reverse tumor extraction?
Yeah,
what a visual, man.
I'm sorry, I'm just a stream of consciousness some days. I want to mention that for those of you who are watching, join in the live chat because Federico is talking watches in our live chat box tonight, as he always does, answering your questions as we roll through our talking points, and we will get to your talking points as you feed them to us once we're done with the news.
Federico wants to talk watches?
Federico wants to talk watches to you.
Is that close? Is that working?
And by the way, Federico's still alive. I know some people were extending words of concern about why he wasn't here on Friday and why he missed his show on Thursday. He got the Florida bug, which is to say he was sitting right under an air conditioning vent. That's the only way you get pneumonia in this state, and he managed to get it.
Man.
So he's on the mend. He's right here in the studio. Fed, thanks for coming back.
We're going to take him to the beach this weekend.
So, question now. Corey T. asks, I had seen your episode on gifting the silver BR-123 to Bruce Williams, who sadly lost his Rolex Air King in a automotive tragedy. It fell off the top of a car. He wasn't in a car accident. But then, Corey says, I watched Bruce's video and I was interested in looking at the vintage series from Bell & Ross, and I stumbled upon the BR-123 Aero Naval, which blew me away. I'd never seen such a gorgeous blue watch. Beautiful super domed sapphire. Ticks a few boxes for me. I've never really looked into Bell & Ross as a brand. I'd known of them as square aviation instrument looking watches. Mm-hmm. So what are our thoughts on the brand and the model, Josh?
So, again, like a Breitling, not a high horology brand.
No.
You're not going to get like highly finished movements. You're getting tool watches from a company that, aeronautically aligns themselves.
Kind of a mini Breitling in how they
similar, yeah,
position themselves.
Right, but obviously, like Corey said, square watches are their thing. So whenever you see, the BR1, or sorry, the BR02, the BR3, that what you're looking for is a square watch. So the vintage, I think that's what these are called, right?
Yeah, the vintage is their
the BR123, right? The BR123, the BR123s. They're cool watches. I've tried them on. They're very wearable, a little bit smaller, not as sporty to say as a square models,
but maybe more versatile.
Well, without a doubt, more versatile. I'd say this: if you're going to have one watch, a square Bell & Ross, well, cool watch probably isn't the one you should have. But if you're going to have one watch, you could absolutely go for a BR-123, especially with the blue dial, blue bezel. I'm a sucker for blue watch.
Yeah,
I know we talked about it before. The Panerai 326, which we have one in stock, and I've been staring at it all day. That kind of checks the box for me, and the dial is very similar. So it's like a sunburst blue with the vintage accents. I think it's a great watch. I'd say, Corey, if your funds are ready and you like the watch enough, I'd say go for it. It's a cool watch. It's great as an addition to a collection, but it's also a nice watch to have.
At $3,400, is it too much? I mean, it's the kind of watch I can't imagine buying at list just because of the Bell & Ross.
Yeah, but I'm sure you can find,
brand
even
issues.
through an authorized dealer, I'm sure you can find a discount, or if you
Okay.
buy it pre-owned, you can get a few ticks off. But again, it's not a watch that's ever going to go to zero.
True.
Right? It's not a watch that if somebody offers it to us, we're going to say, no, thank you, we can't sell it.
Right.
It has resale value. So even at $3,400, your exposure is what? $3,400. So you think about it that way. And a lot of times with watches in that price range, I talk to my customers, they say, oh, is it going to hold value? Is it worth it? Again, think about it. Your exposure is all the money you put into it.
Yeah.
So obviously try to get a discount, but again, it's a watch you could probably keep. It's not a bad watch to hand down
No,
to.
there are many, many, many Breitling models, especially two-tone and precious metal, where you could purchase it and your depreciation will be greater than the total purchase cost of the Bell & Ross BR123 at list. So it's a minimal hazard, still a real ETA caliber. It's the 2895, which is the small seconds version of the 2892, which is a great movement. I think it's important to note that this is a blue watch at a good price, and the vintage series has been around longer than people realize at Bell & Ross. They've been around since 1992 in one form or another, and it was only in 2005 that the Instrument series came out and really kind of revitalized the brand and gave it an image as something more than a Sin knockoff, because
Right.
Sin Uhren of Germany used to build their watches for them. Bell & Ross is a Paris-based design house, kind of like Corum. They're mostly a styling exercise and a branding exercise. They do own their own assembly facility now in Switzerland, but the question always with Bell & Ross is not whether the watch is a good timepiece to own, because most of them are well built and interesting to look at. It's whether you like it, and if you like it, go ahead. Bell & Ross unfortunately does not do a great job of staying on message or recognizing its customer profile. So for every BR123 vintage, for every BR01 92 Instrument Series watch, you see like a diamond-studded tourbillon with a skull on it, or some sort of like
BRX.
yeah,
Or space age, this, that, and the
trying
other.
to be Hublot.
Right, yeah, which is it's rough. But again, they're fun watches.
Yeah.
And if you look at it from that, okay, I want to buy a fun watch, then you look at their catalog and a lot of the things that they have make sense.
Yeah, I would say that if you're buying a diamond bezel moon dial Instrument Series thing, you're going to get slaughtered. If you're looking to buy a $3,400 watch with a beautiful blue dial, a beautiful blue bezel, a great movement inside that can be your everyday watch, I say bombs away.
It comes with a blue strap too,
in the
which is
aviation
just
paradigm.
So awesome. I love blue straps.
It does have a beautiful blue alligator strap, which I like a great
I gotta
deal.
find some of these blue alligators, by the way.
We're down here in Florida, and we've got a lot of alligators. They tend to be brown or green, but they tell me you have to catch the blue ones at night.
Okay, all right. So Fed and I will go out hunting.
It's like the Florida version of cow tipping. So
Got
okay,
him with the bare hands, by the way, too, Fed. All
yeah,
right?
or it doesn't count.
That's right.
So now we have a question. This is right up Josh's alley, but
Sure.
this is actually one forwarded to me from John S., who emailed me. Why don't manufacturers of luxury watches have certified pre-owned programs the way luxury automakers do?
Good question, John.
People always say car guys are watch guys and vice versa. It's almost the same product.
Right,
Or
right.
is it?
So I would say, John, the reason why they don't is because they actually do. So we know that Vertolin.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's one brand that's out there that has pre-owned watches on its website. They call it Linda Vertolin Vintage.
So they buy them back and then they resell them with their warranties and whatnot, which is great. Journe,
Journe does.
which
Patrimony program.
I'm trying to find something that Journe's doing wrong. It's really tough.
Yeah.
It really is. So there's those two manufacturers, and there's a manufacturer that purchases their watches. They're not selling them back yet.
Okay.
They're a company you may have heard of. It's called the Audemars Piguet. So they have two company-owned boutiques in the United States, one off 57th Street in New York City, and then one down here in Bal Harbor, which we prefer the Bal Harbor one because it's nice, and there's lots of palm trees down
Easy
here.
to get there.
That's right. So they actually, if you have a Bell & Ross, if you have an Audemars Piguet and you're looking to upgrade your watch into a new one, you can go ahead and turn that in, and then they refurbish them, and then they're sold as CPO watches, certified pre-owned. So it's a new phenomenon. I'd say all three of those brands started in the last 18 months
Yeah.
doing this. So they're dipping their toe. And I think that there are a few other brands who are trying, maybe not as successfully, because they find out that, hey, these watches don't trade as well as you thought, so you're not getting a great value, moving forward. But it's also motivating these brands, Audemars Piguet, for instance, to tighten things up so that they will hold more value, because they realize by firsthand seeing that, hey, this watch is going to be losing value because of X, and this watch is going to be losing value because of Y. So it is happening. I'd say 10, 15, 20 years down the road, you're going to see every brand is going to have either in-house CPO programs where they're selling their watches pre-owned next to the new watches, or more likely, in my opinion, having separate CPO stores. So having a store outside the area where they're selling the new watches, selling pre-owned watches that are refurbished by the brands, giving them, having the provenance, having full service and warranties and things like that, because I think that's where it should go. That makes a lot of sense, and there is a value there, so they can get more money selling those.
I've often, everything else. I mean, I feel the same way Josh does. I've often thought that in a lot of ways, because showroom space is dear and boutiques tend to be in very high-end areas where, frankly, you can't afford to double your real estate to double your watch cases, that maybe that certified pre-owned, when the brands finally adopt it, will be the domain of the internet, and you'll buy pre-owned watches online through their website, and you will buy new watches in the showrooms, because the showroom is ultimately where the rubber hits the road and you get to try on the watch. And I do feel that if they went certified pre-owned, they'd be competing with their own used watches that would be coming with all assurances, papers, boxes, and a warranty. Right. The only way to level the score is to give the new watch exclusivity in the showroom and make the experience exclusive to the new watch. Otherwise, hey, I'm going to Audemars Piguet and I'm buying a jumbo for like $3,000 less CPO, because why wouldn't I?
But you know what's funny about that, now that you say that? It's actually almost like counterintuitive, because with pre-owned, condition is the first question. That's what we get every single day. What's the condition of this, right? So people are more apt to wanting to see a pre-owned watch, whereas a new watch is a new watch. Doesn't matter what it is. So really, it should be new watches sold online, CPOs in a store. But for sure that won't happen. It'll definitely happen the way you're talking, where they're going to be taking the model that we have, or Govberg, or our competitors, Crown and Caliber, all these places where we're selling them online because we have a large reach. And that's probably where they're going to go, and they're going to be competitors to us. And obviously, it's going to affect our business, but competition's always good, in my opinion.
We're happy that they're going to help to normalize it's like Elon Musk talking about electric cars. He loves that Mercedes is getting into it. He loves that Audi's getting into it. He loves that there's a normalized discussion about electric cars as cars rather than science projects.
That's right.
So in a way, acceptance of pre-owned will help us too, even if the factories run their own.
A question from watches.
We're not. Well, we're there. We're there.
They exist.
Breitling again. So JBO Surf asking a question for Tim. I'm thinking, rather than continuing to exploit the Black Bay range and bring out more and more versions, why not expand the Pelagos range, perhaps with a 40mm no date? Now, this is the Tudor tool watch range, which also includes the North Flag. The Pelagos sits in kind of a neither world in the Tudor model line, because while it's a great value, giving tremendous content and features and accessories for the money, Tudor has sort of built itself as a Rolex-owned Longines, just trading so heavily on the vintage look and the vintage tributes. And while the Pelagos has a little bit of that, it's not in the mainstream of the practice the way the Black Bay is. I think it would be great to see the often rumored, the unicorn-like Pelagos GMT. I think that would make some sense, and I think it would compete with the Omega Planet Ocean series on equal terms.
Does Tudor make a GMT right now?
Well, I'm not sure, to be perfectly honest. I don't think they do. I mean,
that would make too much sense.
They make chronographs, they make alarms. I'm sure they make a GMT, but
they have to. Yeah.
They make
somebody chime in on that.
I'm sure they make a dual time, but I don't think they make something that's explicitly billed as a GMT the way the Rolex GMT is a GMT.
Yeah.
But I would say that expanding the Pelagos range would make sense in the context of a dive chronograph, because I think there's still room to do it in a bigger size than the rather vintagey Black Bay chronograph, and I think that gives them another opportunity to buy that new Breitling movement, lower the unit cost. I just think that the Pelagos is a more appealing line, and maybe they need to focus on making the Pelagos their sea dweller, a more extreme, hardcore, tool-oriented timepiece.
Makes sense.
If the Heritage Black Bays can be their sub, their icon.
I want to say something though, because I've been out of town. We haven't really been able to talk about it. So when all the Basel World releases came out. I was up in Philly, so you and I didn't really talk about it. So two things, and I know we've talked about this before. The Black Bay, every time I saw the watch, I said, damn, I wish this thing had a date. So I'm so unbelievably happy that they added a date to that. So number one. Number two, how do you feel about the two-tone?
I don't like two-tone anything, to be honest. I mean, I got to be totally honest about two-tone. I feel like the only time it works for me is when it's highlights on the dial, like the indices and the hands are rose gold and a steel panel. Right? To me, that works.
Okay.
That's about as close as I can get to embracing two-tone.
Sure. So, understood and respect your opinion.
It's a personal preference thing.
When I saw this watch, because I've been thinking about getting a two-tone Rolex for a while. I've been looking at the GMT and the Submariner. When I saw that watch, now I decided, well, I guess I can save my money because the watch is so unbelievably handsome. I need to see it on the wrist because the 42 millimeter case, can go either way in regards to like how I wear it. I mean, this is a 40 and it's almost like at the edge of being too large. But so I'd like to see the watch on the wrist. But I think the watch is gorgeous. They threw a date on there. The two-tone works so well. It has a vintagey look. I think it's so perfect. So I think, and the price point's like, I know it's capped gold. We're not. There's no question. Okay, it's capped gold. It's not solid links. But I think the watch is beautiful. It's fantastic, and I think they did a great job with that. And one of the things that one of my opinions that I wanted to express and that we didn't really get to talk about since I've been out of town is what these brands lead with in regards to their releases. And so Tudor released with the chronograph, right? The Black Bay Chrono was what they wanted to come out, and that's what they wanted to lead with. And I'm not a huge fan of the watch. It's okay. It's nice, just not for me.
It doesn't sizzle.
It doesn't sizzle. I think that the two-tone, with the fact that they added the date, but the two-tone Black Bay sizzles, in my opinion, along with what Rolex didn't lead with, which is the stainless steel Sky Dweller.
Okay.
The blue dial stainless steel Sky Dweller sizzles unbelievably well.
It does.
I mean, that like you're cooking with grease there, man.
Yeah.
And they led with this watch is big brother.
A 43 millimeter Sea Dweller. They probably should have called attention to the Glamour model, but it was the 50th year of the Sea Dweller. You only get to do that once.
Well, but they didn't do it right, in my opinion, either, which we didn't really discuss.
The follow-up has to be marketing of the Sky Dweller. Josh is definitely right on that count, because a lot of people don't realize that the steel, white gold, white Rolex were mostly steel.
Right.
Came out with black and blue dial options that were so much better looking than the silver dial that you saw splashed everywhere.
Well, you can't even find it. You look on the website; it's hard to find the blue or the black dial stainless steel Sky Dweller, which at 14.4, okay, we deal with a lot of watches, high-end watches and everything, but in relatively, it's unbelievably cheap for that watch. Based on the fact that you had to spend $38,000 or pre-owned, say high 20s, to get the watch, get a Rolex annual calendar. So now you're going to be spending at most 14.4, right? So once they start releasing them and eventually they come down, it's probably around a $10,000 watch, right?
Sure.
So you're getting a Rolex annual calendar, 42 millimeter, for $10,000 with that blue dial?
Considering the first versions of that watch cost 3 times more plus, 3 times and then some. A great watch, and just to circle round back to where this leads Tudor. Tudor can absolutely do a dual-time chronograph in the Pelagos line without reprising the Iconaut. That's the dual-time Tudor that sticks in my mind because it was so controversial. I think there's room for a Pelagos that combines the Pelagos style, the Pelagos value, a chronograph, and a GMT. And I think that would be a bold statement. Priced appropriately, I also think it would be a big seller and give Tudor a credible non-vintage dive watch or a non-vintage sports watch and a do-it-all watch. So a question coming through. This is Richard asking, do you know if the 38.5 millimeter Seamaster Aquaterra annual calendar has been upgraded to master chronometer status? This is actually the first of 2 questions that relate to the Omega Seamaster Aquaterra. Richard, no, it continues with its original caliber 8601. There was a revision to the Aquaterra line to the 150 meter general production mainstream of the Aquaterra at Basel this year, and while those are now master chronometers, master coaxials, they are built in the new BLBN factory. No, the 38 millimeter annual calendar remains with the old guard of pre-METAS certified COSC chronometers for now. I will say that there is a factory consideration here because that BLBN factory that just builds the METAS watches is still being stood up, and it doesn't have the capacity to make all of the watches that Omega would like to roll over to the new standard. Okay, another question. This one coming all the way from Serbia, where Marco M asks us, how much of the price increase of watches with calendar complications, so annual or perpetual, compared to the regular three-handers with date, is from actual production and labor, and how much is just a matter of playing on the perception of exclusivity and status? In other words, a premium for prestige, or an imagined premium.
It's got to be like a mix in there, right?
Yeah, I would say it's not just a mix, it's the kind of thing where there's definitely a transition from one to the other. The real purpose of a price premium will vary over time. Certainly it costs more to develop an annual calendar versus a base movement, but if you consider something like the original debut of the 8500 based annual calendar, that came out in 2008 for Omega. So it's like a movie. The first 2 weekends, the studio's just looking to make its money back. After that, if it's got legs, it's a blockbuster. Now, after the first 2 weeks, you're starting to make a profit, and you can start booking profits. You're not going to lower the price of a ticket once you make your money back. With the watch, you're not going to lower the price of the watch once you make your money back. So in the case of those Omega Aquaterra annual calendars that have been paid for probably most of a decade now, it's a pure profit model. Whereas with, other watches perhaps that come to market and aren't successful, or in the case of something like Péginier, the French brand out of Morteau, came out with its Manufacture Royale, probably failed as a company. It went out of business in this past year, probably failed before it made back the R&D costs for that movement.
Yeah.
So it really varies, Marco. It's going to
Depends
vary.
on how the it depends on how the company handles its finance, because like there's a huge division between the horological value of a brand and the business value of a brand, right? So you see the marriage is Rolex and Patek, or Patek specifically, right?
Sure.
High horological value, very high business value. So that's it. I think it's less about a broad spectrum of annual calendar watches and more about brand to brand, right?
Yeah, I would say really it's brand to brand. There are some ridiculous markups, like we've seen some gold Breitlings that cost 3 times as much. No legitimate reason for that. But we're talking
Just
about...
because.
Marco's asking
Why not?
about complications, though. And in the case of a movement made by a mainstream brand, they're going to make most of their money back fairly quickly. ETA did not spend so much money taking the 8500 to the 8601 that here we are years and years later, and they're still charging you for the research and development. At this point, it's paid for. They're charging you for the prestige. And let me just clarify, like the margins we're talking about here. The standard 41.5 millimeter Seamaster Aquaterra on a bracelet is going to be a $6,000 watch retail. 38.5 with an annual calendar. Now you're talking about an $8,400 watch. So you're talking a 40% premium. To get that watch 43 millimeters, the standard side Aquaterra annual calendar, you're going to be talking about $9,500, so a 58% premium. At this point, with that watch, that is all cream on top. Omega is simply charging a premium. There's still a small cost to build the more complicated movement, but when it costs like 20 Swiss francs to build a 2824, maybe 50 to 60 Swiss francs to build an 8500, and maybe 70 Swiss francs to build the 8601, at this point, the price has no relation to the actual complexity of the assembly.
No, well, they're just taking within market. But okay, so to come back to just what we're talking about, you can see a Rolex annual calendar, which before was a $38,000 watch, is now at a retail level a $14,000 watch. So think about the price increase from $14,000 to say, I think it's $38,000 retail.
Yeah.
Roughly, like the say white gold on a bracelet.
Rolex,
like 48 actually.
It was 48, absolutely.
48. So the difference between $14,000 and $48,000 is now simply just the case metal.
Yeah. I mean, you're not going to find, $30,000 worth of precious metal in there.
That would be nice.
Rolex has paid off the costs of the 9001 movement, or they're very close to it.
Now they're paying it forward.
And at this point, exactly, the premium you pay even for the steel watch over something that's relatively simple, like a Daytona, steel in the same price range, you're paying for the prestige. Rolex has made its money back, and at this point, it's going for volume. So I do have one question that came from, I believe it was John H., who'd asked me about manual wind watches smaller than 41 millimeters that could be purchased pre-owned that had a power reserve on the dial. And so I came up with a couple because he was having trouble listing them. And I would say that your best bets are going to be the Blancpain Reference 1106. It's a 36 millimeter, 37 millimeter watch, manual wind, 100-hour power reserve, dial side. nice watch, consummate dress watch, the Gescher LeCoultre Master 8 Days from the mid to late 2000s. It's got a case code, I want to say 148817. So you should be able to look that up by the case code and find the catalog number, which changes all the time. That's an 8-day with a power reserve that's manual wind. And also consider all of the Seiko Crador spring drive watches with the caliber, I want to say it's like 7R88, A1 and A2. You're going to find that there's a lot more to Crador than the Aiki and the minute repeater. And when you do, you'll realize that they're right in that size you want, John, with the dial side power reserve, manual wind, and the impeccable pedigree and provenance of the Grand Seiko Crador spring drive system, which I respect tremendously.
Good watch. I have to shake your hand real quick. I thought we were going to make it through a whole show without you mentioning JLC, and we couldn't.
Okay, I'm sorry. I failed. I slumped across the finish line.
You got it. Exactly.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate all of your participation in the chat box, chatting it up with Federico. As ever, Federico@watchyouwant.com is funneling questions directly to me for our mailbag episodes. He's also chatting watches, no longer talking watches, chatting watches, on our Instagram, where you can follow him and see all of the watches we bring in, as well as a number of wrist shots from our clients, because we like to give back. Guys, thank you for joining us. We'll be back on Wednesday with Federico joining me in the co-pilot chair. Mike will be back the following week. Until then, be well. Thanks for joining us. I'm Tim. He's Josh. She's Faylene. He's Federico. This is Watch You Want, and thanks for logging on.
See ya.